Спасибо, господин председатель.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank Nihal Saad and Jan Taksur for their statements. First and foremost, I wish once again, as I did before, to emphasize that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church did not turn to us with a request for today's meeting to be held and did not authorize us to speak on its behalf. And we are not talking on behalf of the UOC or its specific priests or parishioners. We understand perfectly well under what circumstances our co-religionists are living in Ukraine. We are aware of the pressure they're being exerted that is being exerted on them under the Zelensky regime, and we have no illusions about what their assessments of today's efforts will be for them, which we will learn about today, most likely in social networks. Distinguished colleagues, the Russian Federation has already drawn the attention of the Security Council to a campaign unleashed by Kyiv to destroy canonical orthodoxy in Ukraine. And this was done during a 17 January 2023 meeting when the effective seizure of UOC holy sites, a persecution, and the beating of worshippers, which was carried out since the brutal coup in Kyiv in 2014, when this reached a new, so to speak, legislative level. As was mentioned by Jan Taksur today, already on 19 January 2023 in the country's parliament, a draft law was introduced that is number 8371, which essentially provided for a prohibition of the UOC and the seizure of its cathedrals. As we are aware, tomorrow, 27 July, this may be put to the vote, this draft law. I will set aside for now the fact that this draft law egregiously violates at the minimum 10 articles of the Ukrainian Constitution, which govern freedom of speech and, first and foremost, civil freedoms. It disregards the fact that the UOC is an independent church with its own governing bodies, which operates on the basis of Ukrainian laws, and it is not governed from Russia. The fact that there were no judicial proceedings targeting the UOC in Ukraine and the alleged violations of Ukrainian legislation by it were not established at the legal level. And this, there's no point in talking about this because Ukraine, since 2014 at least, ceased to be a government based on rule of law, and the Kyiv regime is creating and doing everything it wishes without any consideration for the law. I am talking about what has been happening before your very eyes, egregious, blatant lawlessness and encroachment on basic religious freedoms. You would consider the fact that the parliament in Kyiv is considering the possibility of prohibit by law and to seize the property of the canonical church and with a centuries-old history, which the majority of followers in Ukraine belong to. This is unparalleled in modern history. For example, what would the response be in our host state if the U.S. president were to propose that Congress prohibit the Catholic Church and to seize St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York from it on the basis or the pretext that Catholics are subordinate to Pope Francis and mention him in their prayers? Or, for example, the arrest of a Catholic Church representative in the United States. Or, for example, if the United Kingdom were to arrest one of the leaders of a Muslim community with a British Parliament, in the British Parliament were to discuss a draft law to prohibit this religion in a country under the pretext that Islamic holy sites are present in Mecca and Medina. Is it difficult for you to imagine this kind of a situation? It's hard for us as well, and it seems more likely like something from a fantasy film. However, unfortunately, in Ukraine, this horror film with the collusion of the Western sponsors of the Kyiv regime before our very eyes is becoming a reality. The Zelensky regime consistently has been conducting a state policy of the destruction of canonical orthodoxy in Ukraine. The arsenal of the measures adopted include legal prohibitions, systematic searches, the raid-like seizures of churches, interrogations of worshippers and priests, arrests of them, physical violence, vandalism. State and pro-government media outlets systematically publish mendacious false information which discredits both the church and its bishops. The Kiev regime, without having awaited pseudo-legislative measures, decided to seize from the UOC a canonical site, the Kiev-Pечерska Lavra, and its steward, the Metropolitan of Vyshegorsk and Chernobylsk, Pavlo, under false accusations, was placed under house arrest. On 14 July, after 24/7 house arrest, he was placed in a detention facility. The video, which shows a tragic picture of an elderly man, a highly respected bishop of a church, who was forced to remove his panagia prior to his imprisonment, shook the Orthodox world. For the first time in modern history, a senior bishop of a church is subject to persecution by a state and has been imprisoned for his faith. With their unique brand of cynicism, the Kiev authorities have established the possibility of bail, 33 million grivens. That's approximately $1 million. For example, I will for comparison's sake, I will mention another judicial ruling of the Kiev authorities. A former children's educator from Chernadiev in Zakarpatsk Oblast, Denis Varody, who attempt to bring to a EU country and to sell for $25,000 an 11-month-old early last week, was released with a $27,000 bail, and the bail was provided, and so now this person who was engaged in human trafficking is roaming around freely. And a faith leader, followed with millions of worshippers, an elderly, ill person needing care, is languishing in prison. We turn now to the international community and all faith leaders with a call to stand up to protect Metropolitan Pavlo. Distinguished colleagues, the magnitude of the persecution by the Kiev regime targeting priests of the UOC who have been accused of crimes against the state and social security are reminiscent of the most tragic totalitarian episodes in world history. According to what was published in early April 2023, a report of the Ukrainian Security Service, the USS, in 2022, it carried out more than 40 so-called comprehensive counterintelligence measures. Only since October of 2022 to May 2023, the USS conducted approximately 100 searches in monasteries, cathedrals, and administrative buildings of the diocese of the UOC throughout all of Ukraine. Nearly 250 clerics of the UOC were prohibited entry into Ukraine, so they turned out to be exiles in their own land. And with respect to church officials, approximately including 14 bishops, there were 61 criminal cases lodged with accusations of treason and religious hatred being spread. In February this year, at the proposal of the Kiev regime, the court sentenced to 7 years in prison with an accusation of anti-Ukrainian activity, sentenced a UOC priest who was seized by the Kiev security forces during a raid on Krasno-Limansk region in DNR. And there were 7 sentences handed down targeting priests. Here is a part of the statement of Father Guidon, whom the British censorship did not give the floor to today. Just recently, I met with, and I quote, just recently I met with faith leaders who arrived from Ukraine. I do not wish to provide details due to concerns for their safety and security. They described the horrors of the situation that has been happening since early May in eastern Ukraine. Four priests were forced by Ukrainian military personnel to where they were forced into icy waters in an attempt to force them to disavow their faith and to begin to state Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine. These 3 of these people drowned, and 1 lost consciousness and was carried away by the current. And none of them, by the way, recanted their faith. The Ukrainian military personnel decided that this individual who was carried away by the current was dead, and they did not pull him out, but he survived and told me about what happened. Distinguished colleagues, this brutality targeting Metropolitan Pavlov is an attempt by Kiev to use force to break the resistance of Orthodox Christians who are fighting for their canonical church, and first and foremost an attempt to break the resistance of the monks in Ukraine, the Kiev of Kiev-Pечерська Lavra, who have been forced by the Kiev authorities to vacate the premises. On 6 July 2023, the Minister of Culture and Information of Ukraine, Tkachenko, demanded that the monks leave the premises within 3 days. They refused to comply with these criminal instructions and to receive a handover of property document. On 13 June 2023, a Kiev court cynically declined the suit of the UOC for the museum sanctuary. And on 30 June 2023, Ministry of Culture of Ukrainian National Sanctuary, the Kiev-Pечерська Lavra, demanded that the monks of the UOC leave the premises by 4 July 2023. The UOC, the UOC declined to comply with this illegitimate demand, and there is no court decision that had been handed down about this, and such instructions from the authorities were appealed at the judicial level. Despite this, on 4 July, a specialized commission of the Ministry of Culture began work, that is the Ukrainian Ministry of Culture and Information Policy began work to seal the area, that is to seize the property from the monks. On 6 July 2023, and a lawyer, Archbishop Chikman, speaking in the interest of the UOC, stated that representatives of the sanctuary, with the assistance of the police, broke the locks and infiltrated the section of the monastery, and they also published photographs which show police present at the premises, including intelligence officials, where it was sealed off. As of 14 July, there have been reports about no less than 8 facilities that have been targeted in this way, and the worshippers who are gathering to support the monks are being forcefully dispelled. In this way, unbearable conditions are being created for our monks residing in that Kiev-Pечерська Lavra. With the assistance of the security forces, actions are being undertaken to forcibly drive them out of the monastery. Media outlets are publishing information that the leader of the Kiev regime is discussing with Patriarch Konstantin Bartholomew, considering the transfer of the entire Kiev-Pечерськa Lavra to the marionette-like so-called Orthodox Church of Ukraine. This is pure political schismatic project which has been rebuffed by the majority of Orthodox people in Ukraine. And here, another rhetorical question comes to mind. Can a court in New York seize a Catholic or Orthodox cathedral and, for example, hand it over to the Baptists? If not, then why is it that our American colleagues who champion the so-called universal human rights and freedom of faith values, why are they completely silent, unable to utter even a word with respect to the atrocities that are being perpetrated in Ukraine? At the same time, we are seeing the looting of cultural, spiritual, and historic values and heritage that belongs to Ukrainian people. On 28 June, the Paris Louvre Press Service announced that at the Museum for Temporary Storage and Exhibit, that it received from the Bogdana and Bogdan Halinka National Museum, that from this museum they received valuable artifacts, including 4 icons from the Byzantine period. Moreover, in open sources, there is information about the Kiev-Pечерська Lavra treasures being taken out of Kiev-Pечерська Lavra. Distinguished colleagues, this tragedy of the Kiev-Pечерська Lavra is only the visible part of the iceberg. Throughout Ukraine, wars being waged targeting canonical orthodoxy. At the regional level, first and foremost in Western Ukraine, a campaign has already been unleashed to prohibit the UOC. The relevant decisions in April and May of 2023 were taken in Volynsk, Ivano-Frankivsk, Zhytomyr, Lvov, Rovensk, Chernovitsk, and Khmelnytsk Oblast. The councils of Lvov, Ivano-Frankivsk, Kirovogradsk, Chernovitsk, Ternopolsk, and Rovensk oblasts called on the Upper Rada to prohibit the UOC throughout all of Ukraine. The City Council of Bravar, Kamenetsa-Podolsk, Sum, and Chernovtsov adopted decrees to confiscate the land of the UOC. Today, on the Russian Foreign Ministry website, a detailed report was published about the illegal actions of the Kiev regime targeting the UOC, as well as its priests and parishioners. We will definitely circulate the content of this report amongst you. Colleagues, the repression of the Kiev regime also affected another holy site, the Pechavska Lavra in Ternopolsk Oblast. On 5 April 2023, on the website of the Upper Rada, a draft decree was published turning with a government decree demanding the severing of its ties with the UOC and the nullification of a lease for the abode. In July of 2023, schismatics from the Orthodox Church of Ukraine entered the territory of the Transfiguration Cathedral in Bielya Tserkov and Kievsk Oblast. Locks were broken, doors were broken down, gates were blocked, and worshippers were not allowed inside. Those who attempted to enter the area were dispersed with tear gas, and even fire extinguishers were used. And the invaders at the same time were supported by the local authorities as well as the police. The worshippers have been continuing for months to fight against these atrocities. Distinguished colleagues, to conclude, I wish to stress that no accusations against Russia and no fabrications about the Canonical Orthodox Church in Ukraine give Kiev carte blanche to destroy canonical orthodoxy or to imprison distinguished, respected, and elderly priests whose only fault is that they defend their faith. What right does the Zelensky regime have to expel monks from the Kiev-Pечерska Lava, one of the holiest sites of Orthodoxy? Can Parliament and other state, at the proposal of the president of the country, can they adopt a law to prohibit churches whose worshippers represent the majority of people in that country? Why is it that when today this happens in Ukraine, our Western colleagues who have influence to bear over the Kiev regime shamefully or deliberately and knowingly turn a blind eye to this? Where are your vaunted values? Or, being completely blinded by Russophobia, you are willing to bless absolutely any crimes perpetrated by the Kiev regime, including crimes against freedom of religion? We hope that society in your countries will appropriately assess the situation because you yourselves are afraid to do so. Thank you for your attention.